Chapter 1. Beneath the swirling violet skies of Varannes, where twin suns dipped below the horizon in an opalescent haze, the colossal form of Serak the dragon predator lay dormant atop the shattered remnants of the old Dominion citadel. For 2,000 rotations of the world's slow, languid year, Serak had borne witness to the rise and fall of empires, his cavernous lair carved into the heart of a monolithic, semi-sentient crystal spire that hummed with the residual power of long-extinct arcane technologies. His scales, once a radiant mosaic of molten emerald and gold, had dulled under the relentless accumulation of eons' worth of cosmic dust, volcanic ash, and the detritus of wars fought by those who dared challenge his dominion. Rivers of rust-colored sediment streaked his massive haunches, and corrosive rainstorms had etched intricate fractures into the crystalline ridges that crowned his spiked neck and ridge-lined back. His wings, once capable of generating shockwaves that shattered the walls of mountain fortresses, had folded around him in tattered, leathery folds, whispering their own creaks of neglect whenever the desert wind drifted through the ruins. From his muzzle, long whiskers of obsidian black trembled in the still air, and his eyes' narrow slits of molten amber glowed faintly with an ancient, half-dormant awareness as the final light of dusk quivered across the jagged horizon. Seraka's breath, once scorching enough to sunder steel, exhaled now only in shallow, rasping puffs of stale air that carried the bitter scent of sulfur and forgotten ages. The world around him pulsed with the slow, inexorable hum of change, yet the dragon remained unmoved, a monument to an era beyond reckoning, half buried in legend and myth until the day a human foreman named Callista Cade marched into his domain with nothing but a battered steam washer and the unshakable conviction that even the greatest of predators deserve the mercy of a proper cleansing. Callista Cade remembered her first glimpse of Serak as though it were a fevered dream, in impossible mirage shimmering in the heat haze above the desert's glassy plains. She had been leading an expedition of scavenger haulers and salvage drones, tasked with scavenging the towering ruins of the Old Dominion for residual technology that could jumpstart Earth's faltering off-world colonies. As foreman of the crew, Callista carried the weight of her team's hopes in the battered shoulders of her reinforced exosuit and the determined set of her jaw, which had cracked against an alien world more hostile than any terraformed Mars. She had navigated collapsing ruins, navigational anomalies that bent time's arrow at will, and swarms of biokinetic drones corrupted by the ancient citadel's dying power core. Yet nothing in her 2 decades of frontier service had prepared her for the omnipotent stillness that engulfed the site the moment her scanners registered the telltale signature of living plasma at temperatures exceeding 2,000 Kelvin. She had signaled a halt to all excavation, her team frozen in place as the scanners converged on a single point, the heart of the shattered keep where Serak had slumbered for millennia. At first, they had assumed it was a malfunction and oversaturation of residual power from the fractured spire's crystal matrix. Then the tremors began. The ground beneath their auger drills shuddered, and a sound like rolling thunder echoed through the night as colossal talons scraped against crystallized stone. Under the alien starlight, Callista watched in awe and dread as Seraka's eyes opened, flooded with a primal intelligence honed over epochs of solitary reign. His gaze, vast as worlds and burning with the residue of 1,000 battles, fixed upon her crew with the slow deliberation of a cosmic judge. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat reverberating in her temples as she sized up her options: battle, retreat, or against every instinct screaming in her veins parley. As captain of Earth's first official salvage operation on Varannes, Callista had authority over life and death, but she had learned early that brute force rarely won encounters with beings older than time. She raised her hand in the universal signal of truce, and when Seraka's gaze followed the motion, she spoke into her exosuit's amplifier. "I come unarmed. I seek no spoils of the past, only knowledge and restoration." The words pounded against the walls of her helmet, but they carried the conviction of a woman who had rescued entire mining colonies trapped under meteor strikes and negotiated underground peace treaties with rival factions of genetically modified transhumans. Seraka's maw opened, and a single, low rumble rolled out like distant thunder, sending ripples through the crystal ruins. It was not a roar of war, but a question, a test of resolve. Thus began the most extraordinary contract ever brokered between human and dragon. Callista ordered her team to stand down, motors silent, arms lowered, and approach the creature's folded wing, where centuries of caked detritus formed thick, rocky crusts that threatened to immobilize the ancient membrane forever. Her Foreman's kit was rudimentary, a steam washer repurposed from waste heat engines, a canister of synthesized enzyme cleaner designed for maintenance of terraforming drones, and an assortment of sonic vibrators intended to sift grain-sized ore. Serak shifted, the weight of his immense spine causing tremors that bucked the ground beneath her boots. Undaunted, Callista activated the washer, its nozzle hissing violet steam that swirled around the dragon's wing like the breath of some primordial cloud. She felt the heat wash over her exosuit, the steam's tang of ozone mingling with the sulfuric tang clinging to Serak's scales. The enzyme foam bloomed like alien petals across the surface, parsing away layers of decay with soft, acidic whispers. At first, the dragon remained still, as though contemplating whether to devour her for sacrilege or allow this odd mortal to desecrate his domain. But as the foam dissolved centuries-old incrustations, exposing the brilliant emerald beneath, Serak's eyes softened, a flicker of approval resonating through the bond they had forged in that moment of mutual trust. Steam and detergent became the tools of diplomacy as night deepened into an obsidian sea. Callista worked methodically, panel by panel, her forearm resting against Serak's ridged flank for balance. She listened to the murmur in her calms, anxious voices of her crew, torn between awe and terror, awaiting the signal to intervene if she fell. But Serak had delivered an unspoken promise: no harm to the human who dared to touch his ancient flesh. Each pass of the washer revealed more of the dragon's former splendor, streaks of molten gold glinting beneath the grime, crystalline scales that caught stray starlight and refracted it into prismatic rainbows, and beneath his vast wing fold, a network of bioluminescent veins still faintly pulsing with life. The scent of ash and age was replaced by the sweet undertone of ozone and a metallic tang as his body accepted the cleansing. Callista felt an odd thrill pulse through her spine. She was restoring not only an ancient beast, but a living relic of Varannes' forgotten civilization, whose survival might hold the key to reviving humanity's sagging efforts to terraform far-flung worlds. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by Serak's contented rumble as the last vestiges of 2,000 years of neglect washed away. When the final spray faded and the dragon gave a guttural sigh that sent reverberations through the floor of the citadel, Callista stepped back, water dripping from her visor, and beheld the creature in full glory, a towering leviathan of emerald fire and crystalline regalia, regrown in the space of a single human night. As dawn's first rays glinted off Serak's renewed scales, he lowered his great head until his obsidian whiskers brushed Callista's helmet, a gesture of gratitude that echoed deeper than any mortal language. In that moment, human Foreman and alien dragon predator stood as equals beneath the twin suns, bound by an unbreakable alliance born of compassion and courage. Callista knew that the stories would call her mad, that no one would believe a human had washed a dragon's decades of neglect back to life. Yet the Sentinel of Varannes had chosen her, marking a new chapter in interspecies relations, one where respect and restoration triumphed over conquest and exploitation. And as the dragon's roar of approval rattled the shutters of distant settlements, she realized that this was only the beginning of an extraordinary partnership that would reshape the destiny of two worlds. The tremors of Serak's approving rumble still vibrated through the fractured stones of the Old Dominion citadel when Callista finally lowered her steam washer, letting the residual steam swirl around her like a living fog. Beneath her visor, her breath came in ragged hisses, equal parts exhilaration and relief as she surveyed the titan she had brought back from the brink of ruin. Serak's massive head was bowed in what could only be interpreted as gratitude. His obsidian whiskers brushed against the crystal spines that ringed his neck, flicking away the last granules of ash that clung stubbornly to his revived hide. Behind her, the salvage crew stood in awed silence, their armored silhouettes stark against the sunrise-tinged sky, cameras and sensor arrays trembling in their hands as they captured every exultant detail. Callista stepped forward, her boot crunching against crystalline debris, and placed a hand upon the dragon's fang-streaked muzzle, soft, cool, and impossibly smooth after millennia of neglect. Seraka's molten amber eyes closed at the touch, his great frame settling with a contented sigh that sent ripples across the shattered court below. In that moment, human and dragon shared a breath, a silent communion uniting destinies across the gulf of species. Callista's comm system crackled as her second-in-command, Mara Voss, broke the hush with a tremulous exclamation. "Foreman Cade, you've just achieved the impossible. Serak is responsive. He trusts you." Callista let out a laugh that was part triumph, part astonished joy, and she answered with a steady calm that belied her racing heart. "Maintain position, Mara. Record every parameter. And prepare for our next step, integration. Serak and I have an accord now. We honor it." As dawn climbed higher, gilding the crystal battlements with apricot light, Callista gathered her crew around Seraka's expanse like pilgrims before an ancient altar. She outlined her plan in measured tones. Engineers would retrofit the steam washer into a mobile purification unit capable of traversing the dunes. Biologists would take samples of Seraka's bioluminescent veins to study the dragon's self-regeneration processes, and diplomats, should they arrive, would witness firsthand the first true alliance between human industry and alien sovereignty. Serak, for his part, seemed to understand the gravity of these proceedings. His wings, now cleansed of 2 millennia of decay, unfurled in a slow, majestic arc, casting vast shadows across the courtyard. Each beat of his wings sent shards of crystal tinkling like wind chimes, and the air brimmed with charged particles that hummed with latent power. Callista probed the dragon's thoughts with the empathic flares her exosuit's neural interface afforded her, feeling centuries of solitude dissolve into cautious optimism. In that melding of minds, she sensed Seraka's oldest memories: thunderous migrations across molten plains, battles against Leviathan-Craith beasts in storm-lashed seas, solemn councils where dragonkind once presided over planetary governance. And beneath it all, a single, potent yearning: to walk the world again as a living bridge between past and future. Callista felt the enormity of her charge settle upon her shoulders. She was no longer simply a foreman of salvage operations, but a steward of this world's living heritage and the unlikely ambassador to a creature whose very existence redefined the limits of possibility. As teams scrambled to erect data arrays and field labs around them, the newfound alliance cast its first light into the old citadel's deepest shadows, heralding a dawn not only for Varanis, but for every world that might yet learn to look beyond fear and find kinship in the most unexpected of places. Chapter 2. The news of Seraka's restoration spread faster than the shockwaves rippling through Varanis' fractured crust, carried on solar winds, and relayed through orbital relays to outposts scattered across 24 star systems. By the time a delegation of Varanian elders and human colonial regulators descended in sleek grav shuttles to witness the marvel themselves, Callista's makeshift operations hub had blossomed into a bustling nexus of scientific inquiry and cultural exchange. Under the gargantuan shade of Seraka's outstretched wings, now gleaming plates of emerald and gold refracting the harsh twin suns into dazzling prisms, a council convened unlike any in living memory. Dragonkind's ancient ritual of recognition, wherein the sovereign beast names its chosen champion, interwove with human protocols of scientific accreditation and interspecies treaty. Callista stood at the center of this convergence, clad in ceremonial garb woven from reclaimed dragon scales and earth-forged fibers, her heart a symphony of pride and humility. Elder Thalara of the Varanian Council intoned blessings in a tongue that shimmered with harmonic overtones, each word materializing as ripples of color across the courtyard's crystal mosaics. Serak lowered his massive head until the crown of his horn-sculpted skull dipped within Callista's reach. She extended her hand, and with a resonant vibration that echoed through bone and crystal alike, he tapped her palm, a bond sealed in scales and flesh. Humanity's representatives, their eyes alight with wonder, murmured assurances of shared research, shared protection, and shared destiny. All the while, IRA, small modeling clone of the dragon's molten veins synthesized by bioengineers for education, glowed softly at Callista's side, a living emblem of what could be achieved when courage met compassion. And as the assembly disbanded beneath the twin suns' midday glare, the dragon's roar, a rallying cry of renewal, echoed across the desert plains, reverberating through every canyon and beckoning travelers, scholars, and settlers to heed the call of a new era on Varanus. As the multinational delegation dispersed to the perimeter, establishing field laboratories and diplomatic pavilions beneath Serak's colossal wingspan, Callista walked alongside the dragon through the reclaimed citadel's grand plaza, once a battleground of blood and tyranny, now a sanctuary of renewal. Each footstep of the dragon sent resonant tremors through the motes of crystalline debris, and Callista felt that vibration hum through the soles of her reinforced boots, grounding her in the enormity of the moment. Scientists in gleaming exosuits clustered around makeshift scanners, sampling the dragon's shimmering scales and bioluminescent veins with instruments that ticked and whirred like mechanical insects, while Varanian elders chanted Baroque blessings that wove through the air like living tapestry. Children, both human and Varanian hatchlings, played at Serak's feet, their laughter ringing against the sun-faded murals that told of empires long since reduced to dust. Callista paused before a towering relief carved into the citadel's eastern wall, the ancient treaty between dragon clans and the first starfarers who settled Varanus, preserved in bas-relief despite eons of storm and siege. She placed a hand on the cool, fractured stone and recalled her first steps onto this world as an inexperienced foreman, awed by its savage beauty and haunted by the ghosts of its past. Now, 2,000 years of neglect had been washed away in a single night, and the dragon whose slumber had once promised only ruin now offered a beacon of hope for two civilizations on the cusp of a new alliance. Seraka's rumble of approval vibrated through the air, and Callista knew that every policy drafted, every research grant awarded, and every treaty signed in the weeks to come would be shaped by the simple truth that compassion embodied in a human foreman's steam and solvent could resurrect even the gravest of legends. Night fell over the citadel in a cascade of indigo and starfire, and the delegation gathered under Seraka's vaulted shadow for the festival of rebirth, a tradition resurrected from the old dominion's long-lost archives. Bioluminescent lanterns floated aloft, tethered to dragon-feathered poles carved by Varanian artisans, while human musicians plucked strings of light-weave guitars, weaving melodies that blended earthly chords with draconic harmonics. Callista, seated upon a dais beside Elder Thalara and flanked by human governors and Varanian clan leaders, watched as Serak raised his head to the heavens and exhaled a plume of iridescent mist that glowed with the spectrum of dawn. That mist drifted over the gathered crowd, leaving each guest touched by a gentle warmth and a humming resonance in their bones, the dragon's gift of revitalization, a promise that wounds both old and new could be soothed by unity. Tears glistened in Callista's eyes as she realized that her role had transcended mere foremanship. She was now the living bridge between worlds, the catalyst for a peace that would endure beyond any single lifetime. And as the music swelled and the dragon's mist wove through every heart, she felt the old citadel breathe once more, its fractured stones singing with renewed purpose under the watchful guard of a dragon reborn. Chapter 3. Dawn of the third day found Callista rising before the suns, drawn by the distant thrum of Seraka's morning ritual echoing across the crystalline plateau. Donning her light-field cloak, she ventured beyond the citadel's bounds to the ancient Pyre Field's vast plains littered with the petrified remains of volcanic eruptions, where once Dragonkin gathered to commune with the planet's primal energies. There, Serak awaited, perched atop a ring of basalt pillars that glowed faintly with retained geothermal heat. His wings spread wide. He absorbed the dual sunrise as though drawing strength from the very fabric of Varanus itself. Callista approached with a quiet reverence, carrying the mobile purification unit now upgraded with solar concentrators and nutrient replenishment modules to refine the cleansing formula. She knelt at Seraka's flank, checking sensors that monitored his metabolic response to the previous day's restoration, heart rate stable, bioluminescence at optimal levels, scale integrity restored to 98% of original matrix. But beyond data, she sought deeper understanding. How did a creature of such primal majesty perceive its own rebirth, and what responsibilities would it shoulder as guardian of an entire world again? As the sunlight fractured through Serak's scales, scattering rainbows across the plains, the dragon lowered his massive head until his obsidian whiskers brushed Callista's shoulder in greeting. In that silent touch lay acceptance of her kinship and a tacit invitation to partake in his ritual. With careful precision, Callista deployed the purification unit's secondary nozzle, this time calibrated not for cleaning, but for infusing the dragon's bloodstream with a revitalizing enzyme cocktail derived from Varanian crystal pollen and terrestrial botanicals. The microinjection hissed softly against his hide, and Callista felt a surge of warmth pulse through the ground as Serak exhaled, his breath scattering motes of golden dust that coalesced into glowing motes of raw potential. In that moment, human Foreman and ancient predator stood united as stewards of a world reborn, ready to chart a future that honored both the deep past and the promise of new horizons. The air above the pyre fields thrummed with renewed vitality as Serak unfurled his majestic wings, each span of crystalline membrane catching the dawn light and refracting it into a million living rainbows that danced across the basalt pillars. Callista felt the tremor of his powerful muscles flex beneath her feet, a primal rhythm that pulsed with the heartbeat of Varani's itself. With a single mighty push, Serak launched into the sky, carving an arc of gleaming green and gold against the twin suns, a sight so breathtaking it stilled the very winds. From her vantage point, Callista watched as the dragon circled once, twice, then 3 times, each revolution stirring the latent energies of the planet's crust until geysers of heated mist hissed from hidden fissures below. She could sense the resonance of his presence in ancient frequency that reawakened dormant crystals and called forth long-buried life in the soil. In that suspended moment, she understood the true magnitude of their alliance. Serak was not merely a relic restored, but a catalyst for planetary renewal, his very essence bound to the fate of every living thing on Varani's. Touching down with the grace of a drifting monolith, Serak settled before Callista once more, his eyes reflecting a serene wisdom that transcended the centuries of silence he had endured. Callista pressed a hand to the purification unit's console, reviewing the data streams that flowed in from the dragon's bioluminescent veins. The infusion had accelerated his regenerative processes, mending microfractures in his skeletal crystalline structure and amplifying the natural harmonic frequencies that stabilized the planet's tectonic equilibrium. Yet beyond the cold precision of the readouts, Callista felt a profound bond, a living dialogue conveyed through subtle shifts in the dragon's posture and the warm, low vibration that resonated through the ground. Serak lowered his head until his horned crest brushed her helm, a gesture that conveyed both gratitude and an unspoken question. What next? Callista rose, voice steady with conviction as she answered aloud for both of them. They would journey together across Varani's, tending to its wounds and weaving new pacts between human settlers and draconic guardians. With that shared understanding, they set out across the glowing fields, the dragon's footsteps awakening hidden springs and scarlet blossoms that burst into bloom in his wake, while Callista's purification unit whirred to life to treat each eruption of newfound life, ensuring the world's recovery would be balanced and sustainable. As they vanished into the horizon, their silhouettes, one vast and draconic, the other small yet unbowed, etched a promise into the sky, that healing through compassion and courage could remake even the most ancient and forsaken of worlds. Chapter 4. By the time Callista and Serak approached the first human colony on Varani's, a sprawling network of biodomes and terraced gardens carved into the side of a glassy plateau, the settlers had already felt the stirrings of change beneath their feet. Crystal springs long thought exhausted gushed once more, and the walls of hydroponic farms throbbed with energy as Serak's harmonic resonance coursed through the ground. As the colony's ambassadorial council gathered in the grand atrium, its glass arches stained by centuries of neglect, their astonished faces turned toward the vast shadow that fell across the floor. Serak landed with deliberation, the soles of his talons imprinting sigils of renewal into the polished ceramic tiles, while Callista stepped forward to deliver the first official address of their joint mission. Her voice carried the weight of two worlds united. She spoke of stewardship and shared responsibility, of forging alliances between human ingenuity and dragonborn wisdom, and of healing the scars inflicted by centuries of exploitation. The council listened in rapt silence as Seraka's low rumble harmonized with her words, lending an otherworldly gravitas to the moment. Little did they know that this gathering was only the beginning of a grand undertaking, one that would see human engineers and dragon guardians rebuilding Varannes' waterways, replanting its crystal forests, and confronting a hidden threat that had preyed upon the world in the dragon's long sleep. Together, Callista and Serak would lead an expedition into the planet's shattered core, where the final trials of restoration and reconciliation awaited and where the true test of their extraordinary bond would either forge a future of unity or doom Varannes to darkness once more. The expedition into Varannes' shattered core began at dawn's first light, when Callista and Serak led a caravan of human engineers, Varannian elders, and dragonkin emissaries along a serpentine path of crystalline bridges that spanned magma-forged chasms. Beneath the iridescent canopy of vaulted quartz arches, once the heart of the Old Dominion's power grid, the air pulsed with residual energies that warped perception and threatened to unravel unprepared minds. Callista adjusted the calibration on her harmonic stabilizer, a device melding human sonic emitters with Seraka's own bioluminescent frequencies, designed to counteract the volatile surges of power that coursed through the catacombs below. Seraka's great wings rumbled overhead, each beat sweeping away noxious miasmas of ancient corruption, while his molten amber eyes pierced the dim corridors like twin beacons of hope. As they descended into the planet's molten veins, the walls themselves seemed to convulse with unrest, fractured crystal shards quivering underfoot, their edges humming with latent hostility. At the epicenter lay the Ruin Heart Nexus, a massive crystalline sphere half embedded in molten rock, its facets blackened by the centuries of neglect that had poisoned Varannes' very lifeblood. This was the source of the unseen scourge, a dying core of arcane power that had bled darkness into the waterways and twisted the native fauna into grotesque aberrations. Callista stepped forward, raising her voice to surmount the roar of the magma flow. We stand together now, human, dragon, and Varannian, to cleanse this world of the darkness that has festered for 2,000 years. Seraka's roar joined her cry, a cascading tremor that reverberated through every crystal vein and fractured seam. Engineers activated the harmonic stabilizers, sending waves of restorative frequency pulsing into the nexus, while Varannian mystics chanted rites of release in their ancient tongue, each syllable weaving tendrils of cleansing light around the blackened sphere. Callista engaged the purification unit's core injector, flooding the nexus with her enzyme cocktail recalibrated for raw power filtration. The combined onslaught of sonic resonance, bioenzymatic cleanser, and draconic mist sparked a conflagration of luminous energy. Cracks blossomed across the surface of the nexus, glowing veins of pure crystal light snaking outward until the sphere shattered in a silent explosion of radiant shards. A wave of translucent mist swept through the cavern, washing away centuries of corruption in its wake and leaving the molten rivers clear and life-affirming once more. Creatures twisted by the darkness slithered back into their natural forms, lithe, graceful beasts with scales catching the light like fallen stars, while the very ground beneath them bloomed with fire silk vines and singing quartz flowers. Serak bowed his head in solemn triumph, and Callista, chest heaving, pressed a hand to the dragon's taloned forefoot, feeling the pulse of a world reborn under her touch. When they emerged into the open air again, Varannes greeted them with an eruption of color and song. Crystal fountains arced into the sky, waterfalls glittered down cliff faces, and flocks of phoenix sparrows long absent from these lands swept across the horizon in resplendent spirals. The human colony and the dragonkin settlements came alive with celebration, banners of emerald and silver unfurling beneath Seraka's watchful gaze. Callista addressed the gathered crowds from atop the restored citadel's central spire, her voice carrying on winds scented with the promise of renewal. Let this day stand as testament that even the greatest darkness can be washed away by unity, compassion, and the courage to extend a helping hand. Serak's thunderous roar echoed her words, a vow that dragon and human alike would stand guard over Varanis, ensuring its healing would never again be forsaken. In the years that followed, the bond forged between Callisticade and Serak became legend across star systems. Humans built dragon sanctuaries where both species learned from each other. Varanian scholars archived the new era of cooperation, and the once bleak deserts bloomed into vibrant oases of life. And whenever a newcomer asked how such a mighty predator had returned from 2 millennia of decay, settlers would point to the gleaming spires and say with a smile, "It all began when a human foreman dared to wash away the dust of ages, and in doing so, restored not only a dragon, but an entire world." Thus ended the tale of Serak's rebirth and Callista's brave kindness, a story carried on the winds of Varanis as an eternal reminder that true greatness lies not in domination, but in the grace to heal and the strength to forgive.